$38,000 in HOA fines for a pine tree that's older than the home itself. That's when I knew. This was personal. The HOA president had already forced 5 of my neighbors to sell their lakeside cabins, hammering them with bogus violations until they cracked and sold at rock-bottom prices. And now, she was coming for mine. When I found her name buried in some old files, everything suddenly clicked. This wasn't random. She had been waiting 3 years for revenge, and my cabin was her ultimate prize. By the time it was over, lease fees would triple overnight, dark secrets would surface, and a quiet mountain community would unravel. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I bet your neighborhood has its own horror story. The 6-hour drive from San Francisco to Pine Ridge Lake usually calmed my nerves. Not today. As I sat behind the wheel of my Tesla, autopilot engaged, my mind spun faster than the wheels. I was just 3 months away from wrapping up a major project for a Fortune 500 client, and I hadn't thought much about my lakeside cabin lately. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, the place that had saved me from the worst burnout of my life after I sold my fintech startup 3 years ago. I'd stood on that old dock, watching the Colorado mountains turn gold in the sunset, and decided it was time to rewrite my life's code from line zero. Sure, the $2 million I'd made from the startup acquisition was nice, but what mattered more was the peace I'd found in these woods. My therapist called it finding healing through the cabin. I just knew that writing algorithms while listening to birds, instead of the endless ping of notifications, had saved my sanity. As I turned onto Pine Ridge Drive, the familiar scent of pine and lake water should have welcomed me home. Instead, my cabin looked like a crime scene. Not an actual crime scene, a bureaucratic one. Neon-colored violation notices were plastered across every window, door, and porch post. 47 pieces of pastel paper wrapped around the pillars like the world's most aggressive Christmas decorations. My hands shook as I peeled the first one off the door. Violation number 237. Pine tree exceeds maximum allowable height. I stared at the giant pine, probably 60 years old, standing tall long before the HOA even existed. Probably before my cabin existed, maybe even before Linda Morrison learned how to spell petty. Another notice. Dock lacks modern safety railings, referring, of course, to the handcrafted wooden railings the original owner built in the 1970s. Bird droppings on the deck? That was apparently an environmental hazard. Ryan, thank God you're back. Rosa Martinez, my neighbor of 3 years, hurried across the property line. She had the urgent look of someone watching a slow-motion train wreck. Rosa had inherited her cabin from her grandfather and knew every corner of Pine Ridge history. Linda's gone completely insane, Rosa said, helping me pull notices off the door. She's been targeting lakefront properties for the past 2 years, but the last 3 months have been brutal. The Johnsons sold last month, the Waynes before that. She hit them with so many fines, they couldn't fight back. Rosa's normally warm face looked drawn and tight with worry. Each one of these carries a fine between $50 and $200 per day, she explained. I did the math on Jimmy's place before he gave up. Linda had stacked up $23,000 in fines. Pine needles on the roof, wrong shade of brown on the deck stain, parking the boat at the wrong angle. I pulled out my phone, documenting each violation, my coder instincts kicking in as I began looking for patterns. The HOA website loaded painfully slowly on the mountain's sketchy cell service, but I finally pulled up the recent board election results. Linda Morrison, a president for 5 years, re-elected with exactly 51% of the vote. As someone who had spent years analyzing data patterns, I didn't need much more to feel suspicious. Rosa, I asked slowly, these properties Linda's been targeting a broken bar, let me guess. They're all waterfront. Rosa nodded grimly, every single one within 500 meters of the best swimming spots. Your cabin? Center of the eastern shore, the only natural sand beach. The Johnsons had the second best dock. The Waynes had that gorgeous cove. 5 cabins, sold in 2 years, all bought by the same company, Pine Ridge Resorts LLC. I didn't even need to grab my laptop to recognize the pattern. In the tech world, we called this a hostile takeover disguised as bureaucratic process. Create impossible standards, selectively enforce them, and push the original owners out. I'd seen venture capitalists do it to startups, But using an HOA to steal family cabins, that was a new level of predatory. The fines on my cabin added up to $38,000 they racked up in just 3 months. Rosa, has anyone tried to fight back? Hire a lawyer? I asked. She gave a bitter laugh. David Walsh tried to help the Weens, but Linda knows every loophole in the bylaws. She's got at least 3 board members in her pocket, maybe more. And get this, she used to be a real estate agent. Went bankrupt in 2019 after some client wrote a scathing viral review. Lost everything. Now she's using her HOA power to rebuild her empire. And it's personal. She goes after certain properties like she's settling old scores. The words viral negative review lit up a faint memory. 2019, a broken bar. That was the year one tried to buy my first house, before the startup exit, when I was just another software engineer scraping together a down payment. The agent had been spectacularly incompetent, missed deadlines, filed the wrong paperwork, showed up drunk to the final walkthrough. I'd lost my dream house and $20,000 in earnest money. I'd written my first and only Yelp review that night, drunk on frustration and half a bottle of wine. My blood ran cold as I opened the app and pulled up my old review history. There it was. 0 stars. Linda Morrison. Avoid at all costs. Most incompetent agent in Colorado. Cost me a house. 0 stars. If I could give less, I would. The review had gotten over 3,000 helpful votes. And now, standing here 4 years later, staring at my cabin smothered in violation notices, I realized I had unknowingly painted a target on my own back. My phone buzzed. New email. Unknown sender. Subject line: mandatory meeting. I opened it to find a photo of my cabin, taken from a drone. Across the top, in photoshopped red letters, it read, "Condemned, Mr. Thompson. See me tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp in the HOA office. Every minute you're late doubles your existing fines. I've waited 3 years for this. Don't test me." The words "I've waited 3 years" confirmed my worst suspicion. Linda Morrison had been planning this since the day I bought my cabin, waiting for the perfect moment when I'd be away long enough for her to pile on her ammunition. I glanced at Rosa, then at my violated sanctuary, then back at the photo of what Linda intended to do. The stress headache I'd spent years healing began creeping back, but this time, it came with something else: determination. I had debugged million-line code bases and survived Silicon Valley Shark Tanks. One vindictive HOA president with a grudge? Time to show Linda Morrison what happens when you declare war on someone who solves problems for a living. Sleep evaded me that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, 3 monitors hooked up, and enough coffee to fuel a small startup. By 3 a.m., I had traced Linda Morrison's digital footprint across 2 decades of public records, real estate transactions, and court documents. The Wayback Machine revealed her old real estate website, complete with promises of integrity and excellencia aged like milk left out in the summer sun. Her bankruptcy filing from December 2019 showed she lost $500,000 when a major deal collapsed. The timeline fit perfectly. My review posted in September. Her biggest client pulled out in October. Bankruptcy declared by Christmas. Every document painted the picture of someone who'd fallen from comfortable middle-class success into desperate scrambling. And apparently, she'd decided I was patient zero of her downfall. At 6 a.m., David Walsh answered my call, because that's what good lawyers do for clients who helped fund their first office. "Ryan Thompson, as I live and breathe. Please tell me you're not calling because you've murdered someone." His voice had the dry humor that got us through countless startup battles. "Not yet, David, but the day's young. I need you at the Pine Ridge HOA office at 7:45. Bring your recording gear and your best poker face." I forwarded him the violation notices and Linda's email, explaining the situation. His low whistle confirmed what I'd feared. 38 grand in 3 months, that's not code enforcement, that's extortion. And this drone photo? Ryan, that's criminal threatening. Are you recording all this? Of course. 2 backup systems running simultaneously. Redundancy isn't paranoia when someone's trying to destroy your life. The HOA office was a converted cabin at the lake's north end. Rustic exterior, but inside, a thoroughly modern intimidation chamber. Linda had arranged the space like a courtroom. Her desk sat elevated on a platform, with a single uncomfortable metal chair facing Hero clearly meant for the accused. David and I arrived 15 minutes early, but the door was locked. We waited outside like supplicants. Classic power play. At exactly 8 a.m., Linda appeared. She looked every inch the suburban dictator, a power suit wildly out of place in Lakeside, Colorado, hair perfectly shellacked, and a smile that belonged on a shark who'd just spotted a wounded seal. "Mr. Thompson, I see you brought legal counsel. How predictable." She unlocked the door with theatrical precision and made us follow her inside like obedient pets. The inside of her office confirmed my suspicions. Awards and certificates plastered every wall. A Realtor of the Month from a decade ago, home management certifications from online courses, photos with local politicians. This was someone who built her entire identity on titles and perceived authority. Her real estate license hung prominently on the wall, though a quick check had confirmed it expired in 2020. David took the second chair I pulled from the corner. Linda signed theatrically but clicked a remote. A projector flickered on, displaying the first of what turned out to be 87 slides. Comic Sans font. She'd weaponized Comic Sans. "Let's start with your most egregious violations," she said, laser pointer dancing across photos of my property. I pulled out my laptop, making her pause mid-speech. "Are you seriously taking notes right now?" Linda's voice pitched higher with annoyance. "Just checking something," I said, scrolling through the original 1970 HOA documents I downloaded from the county website. "Interesting. Your first violation claims my grass exceeds 3 inches, but the bylaw only mentions excessive growth that impedes neighbor enjoyment. My cabin is surrounded by national forest on 3 sides. Are the squirrels complaining?" David covered what might have been a laugh with a cough. Linda's face flushed, but she clicked to the next slide, determined. "Fine, let's discuss your unauthorized structure." The photo showed my bird feeder. "That's a bird feeder," I said. "It's hanging from a tree." Her smile turned predatory. "Any structure not present in the original property survey requires board approval." "That feeder wasn't there in 1970. The meeting continued, Linda growing visibly more agitated as I countered every ridiculous violation. Then everything changed when she accidentally showed her hand. An aerial photo of my cabin appeared on screen, surrounded by the other properties she'd targeted. "As you can see, your property's non-compliance affects the entire Eastern Shore aesthetic. Once we remove your eyesore, the whole area can finally reach its full potential." She caught herself. "For community improvement." "Resort," I thought, leaning forward. David's pen stopped mid-scribble. "What resort, Linda?" Her recovery was swift but unconvincing. "I misspoke. I meant once we remove the violations. Obviously, though, if you can't afford the fines, the HOA does have the right to begin foreclosure proceedings." The gleam in her eyes when she said foreclosure told me everything. The door burst open without warning. Connor Morrison, 24 years old according to my research, stood in the doorway looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mom, I need to talk to you." Now, his eyes darted between David and me, something almost like an apology there. Linda's mask slipped. "Not now. Can't you see I'm in the middle of something important? We discussed this." The venom in her voice made Connor flinch. In that moment, I saw 24 years of similar dismissals. His shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller, a defense mechanism I recognized all too well from my own childhood with an overbearing parent. Connor's eyes met mine for just a second, and what I saw wasn't the hostility I'd expected from Linda's son. Instead, exhaustion, shame, and something else, resolve, like someone who'd finally reached a breaking point. He backed toward the door but paused, gripping the door frame so tightly his knuckles went white. "This is wrong, Mom. All of it. You know it's wrong." His voice cracked on the last word. Linda's face twisted in rage. "Don't you dare lecture me about right and wrong. Everything I do is for us, for our future. Now get out." Connor left but not before giving me one last look that clearly said, "I'm sorry." Linda spent the next 5 minutes outlining consequences, her composure restored but brittle. "You have a broken bar, 30 days to fix every violation, every single one. Document everything, because I'll be inspecting personally. One blade of grass too tall, one bird dropping on your dock, and I'll start foreclosure proceedings so fast your head will spin." She leaned in, dropping all pretense of professionalism. "And, Mr. Thompson, this is personal. You cost me everything with that little review. Now, I'm returning the favor." Her words hung in the air like a confession. David's hand steadied my arm, stopping me from replying as we gathered our things and left. Outside in the parking lot, Connor Morrison waited by a beat-up Honda, clutching something in his hands. As we approached, he shoved a USB drive into my palm and whispered urgently, "Everything you need is on here. She's planning something worse. Start with file number 1. Then he peeled out of the lot like the devil was on his tail. I plugged the USB into my phone. 47 audio files appeared, simply labeled by date. I tapped the first one. Linda's voice filled the car. "If Thompson doesn't sell willingly, we'll make him. I don't care if we have to burn his cabin down. I've done it before. I'll do it again." The USB changed everything. Connor had been secretly recording his mother for months, building what prosecutors would later call the most comprehensive documentation of HOA corruption in Colorado history. Each file revealed another layer of her scheme. File 12 caught her bribing board members. "Henderson, here's your 500. Wallace, 750, as agreed. Just keep voting my way." File 33 revealed the resort plan, 8 cabins demolished, replaced by a 50-room resort. Linda's company would get 15% ownership plus $500,000 in cash. But File 37 was the bombshell. Linda, in a hushed call with someone named Dimitri, spoke about laundering money through real estate purchases. "Your investors get clean property titles. I get my cut. Everyone wins. The whole angle makes it all look legitimate." The Russian connection sent a chill down my spine. Dmitry Vyulov, according to my quick research, was linked to a sprawling network that ran from Moscow to Miami, involved in everything from cryptocurrency to cocaine. The FBI had been tracking him for years but never managed to pin him down. He specialized in laundering money through legitimate businesses. And apparently, Linda's whole scheme had caught his attention. She probably thought she'd landed a big-time investor for her resort dreams. Instead, she'd become a small cog in an international crime machine. The irony was almost poetic. Her greed and thirst for revenge had led her straight into the hands of real criminals who would eventually destroy her far more thoroughly than any bad review ever could. I drove home to find my internet and phone lines severed. A work order was taped to the cut cables, claiming HOA infrastructure improvements. My security cameras were offline, and fresh spray paint marked my gate, "Sell or Suffer," dripping in red letters. Instead of anger, I felt the calm that once came when facing impossible code problems. Complex systems always had vulnerabilities. You just had to find the right exploit. I switched on my Starlink backup connection. Thank Silicon Valley paranoia for redundant systems. "Nice try, Linda," I muttered. "But I've been preparing for network failure since Y2K. Within minutes, I was back online, diving deep into public records. What I found confirmed my worst fears about the scale of this conspiracy. That afternoon, Rosa organized an emergency community meeting. 25 homeowners squeezed into the church basement of the only place in Pine Ridge Linda couldn't monitor. The Petersons brought coffee and documentation of their own harassment. The Wallaces had spreadsheets exposing suspicious voting patterns. Even Robert Anderson, who'd quietly served on the board since the 90s, finally found his voice. "I've been keeping records too," he said. "Linda's been forging proxy votessa fake signatures from people who weren't even at meetings, at least 30 in the last election alone." I was too scared to speak up, but enough is enough. The room buzzed with shared stories and growing anger. Everyone held pieces of the puzzle, but no one had seen the full picture until now. I hooked my laptop to the church's ancient projector and pulled up the website I'd built all morning. SavePineRidge.com went live during the meeting, laying everything out in stark clarity. Voting analysis exposing statistical impossibilities. Property records revealing the hostile takeover pattern. A timeline linking Linda's bankruptcy to her revenge campaign. The crown jewel was an interactive map showing how every targeted property formed a perfect footprint for the resort along the eastern shore. "This isn't just corruption," I told the room, clicking through the evidence. "It's organized crime using whole laws as weapons." But here's the beautiful part: she's created a paper trail so detailed we could teach a class on it. I uploaded Connor's audio files, carefully edited to protect his identity while exposing his mother's crimes. Within an hour, the site had 500 views. By evening, local news stations were calling for interviews. The story exploded on social media, with #Pine Ridge corruption trending across Colorado. Comments poured in from across the country, people sharing their own tales of HOA tyranny. My favorite came from a developer in Denver. "This is why we build HOA-free communities." Linda Morrison is everything wrong with the system, but the viral attention brought unexpected consequences. My phone rang at midnight. Unknown number. Heavy accent. "Mr. Thompson, you are making powerful enemies. Take down website, sell cabin, disappear." "This is only warning." The voice was calm, professional, utterly terrifying. Not some local thuga someone used to making problems vanish. "Who is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Someone who protects investments. Dmitry Vulov has $50 million flowing through Pine Ridge project. You are small problem becoming big problem. This does not end well for small problems." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, realizing Linda had no idea what kind of people she'd gotten involved with. The counterattack came at dawn. A process server showed up at my door carrying papers so thick they could prop it open. Linda was suing me for defamation and demanding $1 million in damages plus immediate removal of the website. The lawsuit was clearly meant to intimidate. Her lawyer's online reviews suggested his career was on life support, but the timing showed Linda's desperation. She'd filed before seeing the full website, which meant she hadn't yet discovered Connor's recordings. I called David, who laughed so hard he had to put me on hold. "She's suing you for defamation when you posted public records and her own recorded voice?" "This is a slap suit, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. Basically, illegal bullying through the courts." She just handed us another weapon. Then my laptop screen went black, before flickering to green text like an old-school terminal. "Your bank accounts have been frozen. HOA emergency lien. Pay now or lose everything." I checked my banking apps, every account frozen, credit cards declined, even my investment portfolios locked down. My phone rang immediately. Linda's voice oozed satisfaction. "How's it feel to be broke, hacker boy?" "That's right, I found a judge who owes me a favor. Your assets are frozen until you pay every penny in fines," she sneered. "Or you could just sell me the cabin. I'll even let you keep 10% of market value. Call it charity." The smugness in her voice flipped a switch in my brain. "Linda, you just committed federal wire fraud, banking manipulation across state line, as if that's FBI territory. This call is being recorded, by the way." Silence stretched for several seconds, then all pretense of civility vanished. "You think you are smart? I've destroyed bigger fish than you. Your website will be gone within an hour. Your life will be gone within a week. This is your last chance. Sell or burn." She hung up, leaving me staring at frozen accounts. But Linda had made a critical mistake. She confirmed on recording that she was behind the illegal freeze. Within the hour, my bank's fraud department reversed the freeze and flagged her attempt for federal investigation. Despite multiple takedown attempts, the website stayed live. I'd mirrored it across 7 domains on 3 continents. "You can't delete the internet, Linda." The truth was out, spreading like wildfire, impossible to contain. The $1 million lawsuit should have broken me 3 years ago, when my co-founder vanished with half our funding. This would have triggered panic attacks so bad they felt like heart failure. But sitting on my dock at 2 a.m., watching the moonlight dance on the water while Linda's threats echoed in my mind, I felt something else, not fear, but clarity. My therapist once said, "Isolation amplifies fear." Humans aren't meant to face predators alone. The code metaphor that kept surfacing wasn't about solo genius, it was about distributed systems. No single point of failure. Time to build a network that couldn't be destroyed by one corrupted node. I opened my laptop and started typing. "Dear Pine Ridge neighbors, we're stronger together than alone. Emergency meeting tomorrow night. Time to debug our community." By 7 p.m. the next day, Rose's basement looked like a resistance HQ. 30 homeowners packed the space, with more arriving as word spread. The Petersons brought a whiteboard and color-coded markers. The wall aces had boxes of documentation going back a decade. People who'd never spoken at home meetings before were finding their voices. sharing stories of Linda's harassment. Robert Anderson was first to stand, his usual nervous fidgeting replaced by resolve. "I've been on this board for 15 years, he said. "I've watched it turn from neighborly cooperation into Linda's personal kingdom. I kept thinking someone braver would stand up, but that's how bullies win. They count on good people staying silent. Not anymore." He spread out voting records showing impossible patterns, exactly 51% for Linda every election, the same names voting despite having moved away years ago. Then Rosa dropped the bombshell that changed everything. "My grandfather was one of Pine Ridge's 3 founders," she announced, pulling out a leather portfolio I'd never seen before. "He'd kept these documents in a safety deposit box with instructions to only use them if the HOA ever became corrupt. I think we've reached that point." The room fell silent as she spread out yellowed papers filled with dense 1970s legal language. According to the original bylaws, founding family descendants have special voting rights. Basically, we hold veto power over any board actions that threaten the community. There was more. In cases of proven board corruption, founders can call for immediate dissolution and reorganization of the entire HOA. The implications hit everyone at once. Linda had been operating under the assumption that she controlled the board with a simple majority. She had no idea a nuclear option even existed. "There's one problem," Rosa continued. "I need proof of continuous property ownership and official documentation of board corruption." Ownership was easy. Her family had been here since day one, but corruption needed documented evidence. Everyone started talking at once, offering the evidence they'd collected. The Petersons had emails showing Linda threatening them over fence colors. The Wallaces had recordings of board meetings where Linda silenced opposition. "Together, we had enough to bury here, but we needed it organized and verified." "I can help with that," Connor Morrison said from the doorway. Everyone turned to look at Linda's son, who looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past day. "I've been documenting my mother's crimes for 2 years. I have everything: bribes, threats, forged documents, even video of her taking cash from the Russian investors. I can't watch her destroy this community anymore." Around 9 p.m., an unexpected visitor knocked on Rose's door. Frank Peterson looked like a man carrying terrible secrets. I recognized him from Linda's incorporation documents, her 30% business partner in Pine Ridge Resorts. "I know I'm not welcome," he began. His hands trembled slightly. "But I need out. Linda's got dirt on me, a DUI from 10 years ago, and she's threatening to ruin my contracting business if I don't play along. But this has gone too far. She's planning to burn down 3 cabins next week and make it look like an electrical fire. I want to sell my shares and disappear." $150,000. What I paid, not a cent more. "I just want my life back." The room erupted into heated debates about whether to trust him. "But I saw the opportunity." Owning 30% of Linda's company created a huge conflict of interest. She couldn't use the company to buy properties while serving as HOA president if a hostile shareholder could sue her. "We'll take the deal," I announced, already calculating the logistics. "But this has to be done legally, tonight, with multiple witnesses." Frank nodded eagerly, pulling out a pre-drafted sales agreement. "My lawyer prepared this yesterday. I knew someone would fight back eventually." Linda's gotten sloppy and overconfident. She actually told me last week that after she gets your cabin, Ryan, she plans to change the bylaws to let the board seize any property for a community improvement. She wants the power to take any cabin she wants. The room went cold. This wasn't just about 8 targeted properties anymore. Linda was planning to give herself legal authority to steal any home in Pine Ridge. I made 3 calls to investor friends in San Francisco, explaining the situation. Within an hour, 2 had committed $50,000 each. The community raised the remaining $50,000, with donations ranging from $1,000 to $10,000. By 11 p.m., the money was transferred, papers signed. I now own 30% of the company trying to destroy my home. The drive home should have felt like a victory, but something nagged at me. Linda had been eerily quiet since our phone confrontation. No angry emails, no new violations posted, no suspicious activity around my cabin. From experience, when bullies go silent, they're planning something big. I parked and walked to my dock, needing the lake's calm to process the day's chaos. That's when I heard them. Boat engines in the distance, running without lights. Pine Ridge Lake had strict noise ordinances after 10 p.m., and nobody ran boats in total darkness unless they were up to something illegal. I grabbed my phone and called Rosa. "Get everyone with cameras down to my shore, something's happening." The engines grew louder, accompanied by voices whispering, but carrying clearly across the water. Boats materialized from the darkness, converging on my dock like aquatic vultures. I recognized the lead voice of Linda's contractor, the one who'd cut my internet lines. "Remember, make it look like structural failure, complete destruction by morning. Boss wants no trace of the old dock left." My hands trembled as I started recording, catching boat registration numbers on my phone's night mode. This dock wasn't just wood and nails to me. 3 years ago, after closing the startup sale, I brought Sarah here to propose. She said yes as the sunset painted the mountains gold. We'd planned our future on these weathered planks. The marriage hadn't survived the stress of my next startup, but this dock still held those golden moments. Now Linda was about to destroy it all because I'd written a bad review 4 years ago. Rosa arrived with 5 other neighbors, all armed with cameras and phones. We spread out along the shoreline, documenting everything. 6 men wielding sledgehammers and power tools systematically demolished 50 years of craftsmanship. The sound of splintering wood echoed across the lake like Pine Ridge itself was screaming. Each BL. David showed up next, carrying legal documents and a grim expression. "Emergency injunction filed and granted. Linda can't touch your property or accounts while the criminal investigation moves forward." He glanced toward the ruined dock. "Also, Rosa is exercising her founder's veto on every board action from the past year. Every fine, every violation, every forced sale is suspended pending review." David looked serious. "The federal prosecutor is very interested in those boat registration numbers. Turns out Linda's contractor has a criminal record, 2 arson charges, 1 conviction. This is turning into a RICO case." RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, was made for the mob, but it fit HOA corruption perfectly. My phone buzzed with a text from an accountant friend. "Dude, your HOA president claimed $200,000 in consulting fees from a Russian LLC. Never reported to the IRS. Criminal Division opened a case yesterday." That evening's emergency home meeting was standing room only. Linda had called it to push through new bylaws granting the board seizure powers. Instead, she faced 60 furious homeowners, 3 news cameras, and me sitting front and center with boxes of evidence. She showed up dressed for war in a power suit, but the desperation in her eyes was unmistakable. Her usually flawless hair revealed gray roots, and her hands trembled as she called the meeting to order. "Before we begin," she announced with forced confidence, "I want to address the vicious lies spreading online. This board has always acted in the community's best interest." "You destroyed my dock," I interrupted, standing up. "You sent 6 men to commit federal crimes. We have video evidence." "Your contractor already confessed," the room erupted. But Linda kept her brittle smile. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Perhaps you should have maintained your dock better." That's when Connor stood up. The room went silent as Linda's son faced his mother. "Mom, stop, just stop." His voice cracked but carried. "I have recordings of you ordering the dock's destruction, planning arson, taking bribes, everything." He opened the first box, pulling out printed emails and financial records showing she'd stolen $200,000 from the HOA over 5 years. Videos of her accepting $50,000 in cash from Dmitry Vyulov. Recordings of her promising to burn down cabins. Linda's face changed color, white, then red, then purple. "Connor, honey, you don't understand business. Felonies aren't business, Mom. They're crimes." He turned to the room. "My mother has been using the HOA as her personal revenge fund while pretending to improve the community. It ends tonight." The crowd watched in horrified fascination as Connor methodically presented each piece of evidence. Every document, recording, and video built an airtight case. Linda's transformation was terrifying to witness. From composed president to cornered animal, her carefully constructed facade cracked, then shattered completely. "You ungrateful little bastard," she screamed at Connor. "After everything I've done for you. I built this empire for USA, for our future." Connor's response was quiet but crushing. "No, Mom, You built it on hatred and greed. Dad didn't leave because we were poor. He left because you became someone he didn't recognize. And now I see why." His words hit Linda like blows. She staggered, gripping the podium, breath ragged. For a moment, I saw not a villain, but a broken woman consumed by revenge until nothing else remained. Rosa stood, holding the founder documents like a weapon. "As descendant of Pine Ridge founder Miguel Martinez, I invoke emergency powers under Article 12 of the original covenant," she declared. "I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in Linda Morrison as president." The vote was swift and decisive. Hands shot up around the room of 40, 50, nearly everyone. Even two of Linda's paid board members raised their hands, apparently deciding prison wasn't worth their monthly bribes. "You need 2/3. Linda shrieked. "I count 15 no votes." "You survive." Rosa smiled coldly. "Founder votes count triple. Linda, you're done." But Linda wasn't finished. Her final meltdown would become Pine Ridge legend. "You think you've won? I still own Pine Ridge Resorts. I still have the contracts. I still have the power." She pulled out her phone, hands shaking as she dialed frantically. "Vladimir, yes, it's time. Execute Plan B, all of them, every cabin on the list." She turned to the room, manic eyes wild. "You have 48 hours before county inspectors condemn every one of your homes. Did you know the original surveys were off by 3 feet? Every single cabin is technically on public land. When the county seizes your properties for encroachment, guess who'll be ready to buy them at auction?" She laughed hysterically, mascara running down her cheeks. "No longer the composed president who terrorized us for years. You destroyed my life with your review, Thompson. That one review cost me everything. Everything in my business, my marriage, my future. Now I'm going to destroy yours. All of yours." Her threat, wild and raw, gave us a crucial glimpse of her final plan and time to prepare. As homeowners shouted questions and Linda laughed maniacally, her phone suddenly rang. The color drained from her face as she listened. "What do you mean the FBI is at my office? What do you mean they have the safe?" Her eyes darted wildly around the room, finally realizing that her empire was collapsing. "This isn't over!" she screamed, racing for the door. But we all knew it was. The woman who had weaponized bureaucracy for revenge had finally overplayed her hand and the house of cards was falling. Sirens wailed in the distance. Connor sank into a chair, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry it took me this long." I put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing. That took incredible courage." He looked up at me, haunted. "She's still my mom. Despite everything, she's still my mom." The pain in his voice reminded us all that even justice carries a cost. At 6 a.m., Linda made her last desperate move. 20 trucks rolled into Pine Ridge like an invading army, each marked with county building inspection signs on doors that looked suspiciously fresh. But we were ready. The real county inspector, tipped off by David at 4 a.m., arrived at 6:15 with the sheriff. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, scrutinizing the fake inspection orders. "These are forgeries." "That's a felony." The fake inspectors scattered, abandoning their trucks. Linda's nuclear option had fizzled into more criminal charges. But the real bombs were still to come. While Linda was focused on her inspection scheme, we launched 3 synchronized strikes to end her reign once and for all. First, Rosa's founder powers. At the emergency board meeting called for 7 a.m., she stood before every homeowner who could make it. "Under the founder's covenant," she declared, "I hereby restructure all HOA fees effective immediately. Residential properties remain at $200 monthly. Commercial properties pay $600. Properties held by LLCs for development pay $2,000 monthly. This applies retroactively to when properties were transferred to commercial entities." Linda arrived expecting to gloat about the inspections but went pale as she did the math. That's $240,000. "You can't do this," she spat. Rose's smile was ice cold. "Actually, with penalties and interest, it's over $300,000. Due in 30 days, or we place liens on all Pine Ridge Resorts properties." The second strike came from Connor, who had spent the night with the FBI. "Mom, I'm sorry it had to come to this." He turned to the room, voice steady despite the pain etched on his face. "I've provided federal agents with 2 years of evidence documenting my mother's crimes. They're executing search warrants right now." As if summoned by his words, Linda's phone exploded with calls. Her assistant sobbed, "They're taking everything." Her lawyer panicked, "Don't say anything." Her accountant gasped, "The IRS just froze all accounts." This is bad. Each call drained more color from Linda's face until she looked ghostly, but the third strike was mine to deliver. "Linda, while you were playing games, I was shopping." As a 30% owner of Pine Ridge Resorts, I've seen all the financial documents. Your friend Dimitri has been under federal investigation for 18 months. That $200,000 he paid you traces directly to a Miami drug operation. You've been laundering money for the mob. The room fell into stunned silence as Linda Morrison crumbled like a house of cards. "This isn't possible," she whispered, then screamed. "I planned everything, every detail." She spun toward Connor. "How could you betray your own mother?" "Everything I did was for us." Connor's response was quiet but crushing. "No, Mom. Everything you did was for revenge. Dad didn't leave because of money. He left because you changed." Linda lunged at Connor, screaming incoherently. It took 3 men to restrain her as she clawed and bit like a wild animal. That's when the federal marshals arrived. 3 black SUVs pulled up. Agents in FBI windbreakers moved with practiced precision. The lead agent read from a warrant. "Linda Morrison, you are under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut on Linda's wrists marked the end of a 5-year nightmare. She made one last desperate attempt at dignity. "My lawyers will destroy all of you. I'll own this entire lake." The agent cut her off coldly. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." As they led her away, Linda passed her cabin one last time. For a moment, the mask completely dropped. She looked at the home she'd bought with legitimate money before the hatred consumed her, and something like regret flickered across her face. "I just wanted to matter again," she whispered to no one in particular. "I used to matter." Then the moment passed. The hardness returned. She spat at me. Linda was escorted, her feet barely touching the ground, as agents guided her into the waiting SUV. "This isn't over, Thompson. People like me don't stay down," she spat, defiant to the last. But we all knew the truth. It was over. The woman who had terrorized Pine Ridge for 5 long years was headed for federal prison, and her carefully built empire of revenge lay in ruins. The days that followed were chaotic and reporters swarmed, neighbors cried with relief, and the community slowly exhaled. But the best moment came when Connor approached me quietly. "I'm sorry about everything. I should have acted sooner." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You acted when it mattered most. That took real courage." He looked up with haunted eyes. "I keep thinking about who she used to be before the bankruptcy, before the anger. She used to laugh." His voice cracked. "When did my mom become a monster?" I had no answer. Sometimes good people let darkness swallow them whole, until nothing good remains. The war for Pine Ridge was over. But the scars would take time to heal. The federal courthouse in Denver became Linda Morrison's final stage. But this time, she lacked the commanding presence she had wielded as HOA president. 3 months of investigation had uncovered everything. $400,000 in embezzlement, racketeering, tax evasion, conspiracy to commit arson, and 37 counts of fraud. Armed with Connor's recordings and our mountain of evidence, the prosecutors painted an undeniable portrait of guilt. Linda's defense lawyer tried to spin sympathy as struggling single mother, bad choices after bankruptcy. But when the recording of Linda ordering my dock destroyed played in court, jurors visibly recoiled. The verdict came back in less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing day brought closure to many. Linda stood before the judge, dressed in orange instead of Armani, her HOA president mask stripped away. "Miss Morrison," the judge intoned, "you betrayed the fundamental trust of community leadership. You weaponized bureaucracy for personal revenge." She was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, a lifetime ban from any position of financial trust, and ordered to pay $500,000 in restitution to your victims. Her sobs as they led her away were the last sounds she made in Pine Ridge history. But her story wasn't finished yet. The Russian connection sparked a larger federal investigation, indicting 12 people for money laundering. Dmitry Volkov fled to a non-extradition country, leaving angry investors and frozen assets in his wake. Pine Ridge Resorts LLC collapsed in bankruptcy court. Its assets, including 5 cabins stolen from families, subject to judicial review. Healing in the community began immediately. Robert Anderson was elected interim president by unanimous consent. He called the first meeting with self-deprecating humor. "I promise to bore you all to death with actual democratic process," he joked. His first motion repealed every rule Linda had imposed. Gone were the strict grass height limits, the architectural committees, and the special assessments. We returned to the original 1970 bylaws with only minor modern updates. Rosa established the Pine Ridge Founders Fund, fueled by the $300,000 in fees owed by Linda's LLC. "This fund honors my grandfather's vision, a community-supporting community," she explained. The 5 families who lost cabins to Linda's schemes faced a complicated road to recovery. The court ruled sales made under duress voidably, but fair compensation was required. Eventually, each family was offered the chance to repurchase their cabin at the original sale price plus inflation. The Johnsons wept tears of joy when they got their keys back. The Waynes threw an immediate neighborhood barbecue. Mrs. Patterson, 78 years old, planted new flowers the day she returned home. "Linda might have stolen my house," she said, "but she couldn't steal my roots." Connor Morrison emerged as an unexpected hero. Despite his mother's crimes, the community embraced him for his courage at choosing justice over family loyalty. He spent days helping victims navigate legal paperwork and evenings at the coding boot camp I arranged. "I'm thinking about tech law," he told me one night while debugging JavaScript. "There'll be more cases like this. People need advocates who understand both the system and human nature." His transformation from Linda's nervous son to confident advocate was remarkable. When he landed his first developer job 6 months later, half of Pine Ridge celebrated with him. His success became part of our healing, a proof that we could choose different paths than those laid by our parents. "She's still my mom," he told me once. "I put money in her commissary account. I write letters she never answers. But I won't become her." That distinction mattered more than any code he'd ever write. My own journey took unexpected turns. The homeowners elected me HOA president, a role I'd never sought but felt compelled to accept. My first act was radical transparency. Every meeting live-streamed, every document public, every vote recorded. "Sunshine is the best disinfectant," I told the community. "If we wouldn't want it filmed, we shouldn't be doing it." The reformed HOA became a model for others struggling with corruption. We consulted communities from Oregon to Florida, sharing documents and strategies for democratic governance. The dock rebuilding became a community project, a healing more than just splintered wood. Every household contributed, whether lumber, labor, or lemonade for the workers. The Petersons, master woodworkers, led construction. Connor designed the memorial plaque, "When systems fail, debug together." Pine Ridge 2024. Rather than just rebuilding what was lost, we created something better: wider paths for wheelchairs, lower sections for children, and benches perfectly placed for watching the sunset. The project took 2 months, with different families taking turns. The Wallaces lent their electrical expertise, adding subtle lighting for evening gatherings. Rose's cousins, skilled metalworkers, crafted artistic railings that told Pine Ridge's story through abstract designs. Even Mrs. Patterson, who couldn't lift a single plank, contributed by researching the original 1920s construction methods, ensuring we honor the past while building for the future. On the day we celebrated completion, someone remarked, "It's stronger than the original." "That's what happens after trauma," Rosa said. "You don't just restore, you improve." My cabin became the headquarters for a new venture born from our struggle. The HOA transparency platform I'd pitched to investors was no longer just theory. We'd proven it under fire. $5 million in funding let us build tools for communities battling corruption, voting verification systems, financial transparency dashboards, and communication platforms designed to resist control by any single bad actor. We hired locally whenever possible, turning Pine Ridge into an unexpected tech hub. The platform launched with 100 beta communities and grew to 5,000 within a year. Each success story reaffirmed our mission: a technology serving human community, not replacing it. 1 year after Linda's arrest, Pine Ridge celebrated its first annual Liberation Day barbecue. The whole community gathered on the eastern shore, using the very beach Linda had tried to steal. Children splashed in water that mirrored the grandeur of Colorado's mountains. Adults shared food and stories, the sun casting everything in gold. Connor gave a speech about choosing courage over comfort, leaving many in tears. "My mother taught me something important," he said, steady and clear. "She showed me exactly who I never want to become. Every day, I choose to build instead of destroy, to help instead of harm. That's my way of honoring who she could have been." Even reporters who'd covered the turmoil came back, amazed at our transformation from battleground to model community. As the party wound down, I found myself on the rebuilt dock, surrounded by the original neighbors who had stood strong. Rosa raised her beer, "To debugging corruption, a one line at a time." We toasted, but the moment carried weight. We'd faced down a tyrant with wisdom, courage, and community solidarity. The system worked when good people refused to surrender to bad actors. Later that evening, I received a letter forwarded from my attorney. Linda's handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. "I hope you're happy, you won. Enjoy the cabin I couldn't burn down." No apology, no admission of guilt, just bitter acceptance of defeat. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the fire pit. Some code can't be debugged, only deleted. The final scene writes itself. Sunset over Pine Ridge Lake. My laptop opened to code that would help another community fight their own. Linda Morrison. A message popped up from a homeowner in Texas. "Your platform just helped us expose 3 years of embezzlement. Thank you for showing us how to fight back." I smiled, typed a response, then closed the laptop to watch the light fade over the water. 3 years ago, this place saved me from burnout. Now it had taught me that the best debugging happens in community. Peace at Pine Ridge wasn't just the absence of conflict, it was the presence of justice. And that's how a software engineer used logic, law, and laptop courage to refactor an entire HOA operating system. Linda Morrison learned about FOFA the hard way, a fraud around. Find out in federal prison. As for me, I learned that the best code isn't written in an IDE, but in the communities we build together, in real life. If your HOA shows signs of corruption, remember, document everything. Read the source code of your bylaws, and never underestimate the power of distributed human networks fighting for justice. This is Ryan Thompson signing off from Pine Ridge, where the only bugs now are real beetles enjoying their natural habitat. System.exit 0. Peace out, and stay vigilant, neighbors.